The crystal chandelier above our table cast dancing shadows across 12 shocked faces as I slowly removed my engagement ring. Harold Blackwell, my fiancé's father, had just declared loudly enough for the entire steakhouse to hear that girls like me only want comfort, not commitment. Ryan, the man I thought loved me, smirked and added that I had upgraded from poverty to pearls in weeks. The weight of their cruelty settled like ice in my chest. Without a word, I placed the 2-carat diamond on the white tablecloth and stood. Every conversation in the restaurant had stopped. I walked past the mahogany bar through the brass doors into the cool evening air, leaving behind the wreckage of what I thought was my future. My name is Leanna, and I need to tell you how I ended up in that humiliating moment, because everything Harold Blackwell said about me was a lie, and Ryan knew it. I grew up in a small apartment above Murphy's hardware store on Elm Street. My mother, Sarah, worked 3 jobs after my father walked out when I was 8 years old. She cleaned offices before dawn, served lunch at the community center, and stocked shelves at the grocery store until midnight. I watched her count coins for groceries and mend our clothes until they fell apart. But my mother never let me feel sorry for myself. She made me understand that our circumstances didn't define our worth. Every night she helped me with homework at our tiny kitchen table, pushing me to excel in school, because education was the one thing nobody could take away. I earned straight A's throughout high school and received a full academic scholarship to State University. College wasn't easy. While other students partied on weekends, I waited tables at Tony's Diner and tutored struggling freshmen in mathematics. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and communications. After sending out 237 job applications, I landed a position as a marketing coordinator at Davidson Creative Agency in downtown Portland. That's where my story with Ryan really begins. 6 months ago, I was grabbing my usual coffee at Bean There Cafe near my office when this guy in line behind me started talking about the book I was reading. He recognized it as the latest environmental science publication by Dr. Rebecca Martinez, and we ended up discussing climate policy for 20 minutes. Ryan was charming in an understated way. He wore simple jeans and a flannel shirt, drove an older Toyota Camry, and suggested we meet for hiking instead of expensive restaurants. For our first 3 dates, I had no idea his family had money. He seemed genuinely interested in my work, my goals, my thoughts about sustainable marketing practices. We cooked dinner together in my studio apartment, watched documentaries about ocean conservation, and talked for hours about books we both loved. The truth about his background came out gradually. He mentioned his father worked in real estate, that his family lived in the West Hills, that he had trust funds he rarely touched. But Ryan seemed embarrassed by his privilege, almost apologetic about it. He told me he wanted to make his own way in the world, that he admired my independence and work ethic. I fell in love with who I thought he was. Someone kind, thoughtful, and genuine. Someone who saw past my secondhand clothes and appreciated my mind. When he proposed 2 months ago at the waterfront park where we had our first real conversation about our dreams, I believed we were building something authentic together. That brings me to 3 days after the engagement dinner disaster. I was sitting at my desk at Davidson Creative, still reeling from the humiliation, when my coworker, Jessica, knocked on my cubicle wall. "Leanna, you need to see this," she said, holding her phone with a strange expression on her face. She showed me Ryan's Instagram account, specifically posts from 8 months ago, long before we met. My blood turned cold as I read his words. "Time to shake things up. Dad thinks I'm too predictable. Maybe I should date someone from the wrong side of town just to watch him lose his mind. Could be entertaining." Another post from 7 months ago. "Project Rebel Son is in motion. Found the perfect girl to bring home and horrify the family. Working class scholarship kid, everything Dad despises. This should be fun." Jessica scrolled to show me more. Posts about deliberately seeking out coffee shops in regular neighborhoods to meet authentic women. Comments from his wealthy friends encouraging his social experiment and betting on how long it would take his family to shut it down. The man I loved had been using me as a prop in his rebellion against his privileged upbringing. Every genuine moment I thought we shared, every vulnerable conversation about my background, every time I worried I wasn't sophisticated enough for his world, it had all been part of his entertainment. I wasn't devastated anymore. I was furious. Rage has a way of clarifying your mind. Instead of crying or calling in sick, I decided to learn everything I could about the Blackwell family. If Ryan wanted to play games, I would understand exactly what game we were playing. My cousin Patricia works as a paralegal at Henderson & Associates downtown. When I called her that evening, she immediately agreed to help me research public records. Patricia had always been protective of me since childhood, and when I explained what happened, she was ready for war. Those people messed with the wrong family, she said, pulling files at her law firm the next morning. Let's see what the mighty Blackwells are hiding. What we found was shocking. Harold Blackwell's real estate empire was crumbling. His company, Blackwell Properties, was facing 3 major lawsuits from former business partners who claimed he used fraudulent appraisals and forged documents to acquire prime downtown properties. The legal fees were astronomical, over $2 million and climbing. Patricia discovered liens on 7 of Harold's properties, including the family's mansion in the West Hills. The Blackwells owed $600,000 in back taxes to the state of Oregon. Their credit reports showed massive debt across multiple accounts, all masked by minimum payments and financial juggling. Marcus Rodriguez, another paralegal at Patricia's firm, had worked on similar cases involving real estate fraud. He helped us understand the documents we were finding. This family is in serious trouble, Marcus explained, pointing to a stack of legal papers. They're living on borrowed money and borrowed time. All this wealth is an illusion. They're probably months away from losing everything. But the most disturbing discovery came when Patricia accessed court records from civil proceedings. We found a pattern of Harold Blackwell systematically destroying his children's relationships whenever they became serious. Ryan's older brother, James, had been engaged to a nurse named Caroline 3 years ago. Court documents showed Harold hired a private investigator to dig up embarrassing information about Caroline's family, then used it to pressure James into ending the engagement. Amanda, Ryan's younger sister, had been in a long-term relationship with a public school teacher named David. Harold convinced Amanda that David was only interested in her money, despite David consistently refusing expensive gifts and paying for all their dates himself. The relationship ended when Harold threatened to cut off Amanda's college funding unless she broke up with David. Most heartbreaking was the file about Emma Thompson Ryan's previous girlfriend. Emma was an elementary school teacher from Beaverton who dated Ryan for 18 months. According to the documents, Harold launched a campaign of psychological warfare against her. He spread rumors in her professional circles about her gold-digging behavior, contacted her school principal with false concerns about her character, and finally cornered her at a family gathering to tell her she was embarrassing Ryan and holding him back from his real potential. Patricia found Emma's resignation letter to the school district submitted 2 weeks after her breakup with Ryan. Emma wrote that she could no longer function in her position due to personal attacks on my character that have compromised my ability to serve my students effectively. She moved to Seattle and left teaching entirely. This man destroys people for sport, Patricia said, her voice shaking with anger, and Ryan just lets it happen. But there was more. Marcus had a contact at the Financial Crimes Division who was willing to share some general information about ongoing investigations. Harold Blackwell was already on their radar for potential tax evasion and fraud. Our research was actually documenting evidence of crimes that were already being investigated. The biggest shock came on Friday afternoon. Patricia called me at work, barely able to contain her excitement. Leanna, you're not going to believe this. I found Harold's real motivation for breaking up you and Ryan. She had discovered that Harold was negotiating a business deal with the wealthy Morrison family who owned a chain of luxury hotels throughout the Pacific Northwest. The deal would provide the cash infusion Harold desperately needed to avoid bankruptcy, but it came with strings attached. Charles Morrison had made it clear that any partnership would be family to family, meaning his daughter Victoria would need to marry into the Blackwell family to seal the arrangement. Victoria Morrison was 24 years old, recently graduated from business school and heir to a fortune worth over $50 million. Harold hadn't just humiliated me to get rid of me. He had orchestrated the entire engagement dinner disaster to clear the way for Ryan's arranged marriage to Victoria Morrison. The wedding was supposed to be Harold's salvation from financial ruin. I wasn't just some girl who got her heart broken. I was an obstacle that had been strategically eliminated so Harold could pimp out his son to save his failing business empire. That's when I realized I wasn't the victim in this story. I was going to be the one who brought the whole house of cards crashing down. I knew I needed to talk to Amanda Ryan's sister. During the engagement dinner, she had been the only family member who looked uncomfortable when Harold launched his attack. While everyone else either smirked or stayed silent, Amanda kept glancing at me with what looked like sympathy and shame. Amanda lived in Eugene, about 2 hours south of Portland, where she worked as a social worker for the County Family Services Department. I found her contact information through her university alumni directory and called her on Saturday morning. "Amanda, this is Leanna. I know this is awkward, but I really need to talk to you about what happened at dinner." There was a long pause before she responded. "I was wondering if you would reach out. I felt sick about that night. Can you drive down here? There are things you need to know, but I can't discuss them over the phone." Amanda lived in a modest duplex near the University of Oregon campus, a sharp contrast to the family's mansion in Portland's West Hills. She greeted me at the door wearing jeans and a volunteer t-shirt from the local animal shelter, looking nothing like the polished socialite I had expected. "I moved here specifically to get away from my family's toxicity," she said as we sat in her simple living room. "What my father did to you was cruel and calculated, but it wasn't personal. He destroys everyone." Amanda made tea while explaining how Harold had controlled and manipulated his children their entire lives. Any sign of independence or authentic relationships was met with financial threats, emotional manipulation, and systematic destruction of their happiness. "He ruined my relationship with David 2 years ago." Amanda said, her voice cracking slightly. "David was the kindest man I've ever known. He taught 4th grade coach Little League for free on weekends and volunteered at homeless shelters during school breaks. He never wanted anything from me except companionship and love." She showed me photos of David Martinez, a warm-faced man with kind eyes who looked genuinely happy in every picture with Amanda. They had met at a community garden where both volunteered bonding over their shared commitment to social justice and environmental causes. David insisted on paying for every date we went on, even though he knew I had family money. When I tried to buy him gifts, he would ask me to donate the money to charity instead. He was everything my father claims to value: hardworking, moral, independent. But he wasn't from the right social class. Harold had systematically destroyed their relationship over 6 months. First, he hired a private investigator to follow David and look for anything scandalous. When that turned up nothing, Harold began spreading rumors in David's professional circles, suggesting he was using Amanda to gain access to wealthy families for networking purposes. The final blow came when Harold contacted the school principal and school board members, claiming David was using his relationship with a prominent family to seek inappropriate favors and advancement. Even though the allegations were completely false, the scrutiny made David's work environment impossible. "David broke up with me to protect his career and his students," Amanda said, wiping away tears. "He said he couldn't let his relationship with me jeopardize the education of 30 kids who depended on him. That's the kind of man he was, more concerned about his students than his own happiness." But the most devastating revelation was still coming. Amanda pulled out a shoebox filled with letters and documents she had been secretly collecting for years. "Leanna, what happened to you has happened to at least 6 other women in the past 5 years. My father has a system." She showed me detailed records of Harold's pattern. Whenever one of his children developed a serious relationship with someone he deemed unsuitable, Harold would research the person's background, identify their vulnerabilities, and launch a coordinated campaign of destruction. Ryan's previous girlfriend, Emma, wasn't the first teacher Harold had targeted. 3 years ago, James had been dating a veterinarian named Dr. Sarah Kim. Harold contacted the state veterinary board with false complaints about her practice, forcing her to spend thousands on legal fees to defend her professional license. The stress destroyed her relationship with James and nearly destroyed her career. The engagement dinner humiliation is actually his preferred method, Amanda explained. He creates a public scene that's so traumatic and embarrassing that the woman never wants to see our family again. It's psychological warfare designed to make you remove yourself from the situation. Amanda had been documenting everything because she suspected her father was committing actual crimes, not just being manipulative. Her background in social work had taught her to recognize patterns of systematic abuse. But there's something else you need to know about Ryan specifically, Amanda said, her expression growing more serious. My grandfather left him a substantial trust fund when he died 5 years ago. The fund contains not just money, but controlling shares in several of Harold's real estate companies. She explained that Harold had been managing Ryan's trust fund, supposedly investing it wisely for his future. But Amanda suspected Harold had been using Ryan's money to cover his own debts and legal expenses. If Harold is stealing from Ryan's trust fund, that's embezzlement and fraud. And if Ryan's fund contains controlling shares in the companies, Ryan could potentially take over the business operations and stop Harold's destructive behavior. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Amanda had been secretly monitoring Harold's communications through his shared family computer, something their controlling father insisted on to keep the family connected. Leanna Harold isn't just planning to arrange Ryan's marriage to Victoria Morrison. The engagement announcement is scheduled for next Saturday night at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. 300 people will be there, including most of Portland's wealthy families and business leaders. She showed me Harold's email correspondence with Charles Morrison. The two men had been planning this arrangement for months long before Ryan and I had even met. Harold's humiliation of me at the engagement dinner wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was step one of a carefully orchestrated plan to clear the way for Ryan's forced marriage to Victoria. Ryan doesn't know any of this, Amanda said. Harold told him the Morrison family simply invited him to be Victoria's date for the charity gala, just a social introduction. Ryan thinks he's going as a family favor. I stared at the evidence Amanda had compiled, feeling a mix of rage and clarity wash over me. Harold Blackwell wasn't just a manipulative father or a failing businessman. He was a predator who systematically destroyed innocent people to maintain his power and cover his crimes. And next Saturday night, he planned to complete his latest scheme by trapping his own son in a loveless marriage to save himself from bankruptcy. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I drove back to Portland with a plan forming in my mind. Harold Blackwell had underestimated me completely. He saw a working-class girl he could humiliate and dismiss. He had no idea he was dealing with a marketing professional who specialized in research strategy and communication. By Monday morning, I had reached out to Emma Thompson in Seattle. It took some detective work to find her contact information, but I eventually located her through her new job at a nonprofit environmental organization. When I called and explained who I was, there was a long silence before she spoke. "So, you're Harold's latest victim," Emma said, her voice carrying a mixture of sadness and anger. I wondered when he would strike again. Emma agreed to meet me in Portland that weekend. She had never fully processed the trauma of what Harold put her through, and learning about his pattern of destroying women gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. "I lost my teaching career because of that man," Emma said when we met at a quiet cafe in Southeast Portland. "I loved those kids, and I was good at my job. But Harold's campaign of lies and harassment made it impossible for me to function in the classroom." Emma still had all the documentation from Harold's attacks on her, the false complaints to her school district, the rumors he spread to other teachers, the threatening messages he left on her voicemail. She'd kept everything hoping someday she might find a way to seek justice. But there's something else I discovered after I moved to Seattle, Emma said, pulling out a folder of documents. I hired a lawyer to explore my legal options against Harold, and we found something interesting. Her attorney had discovered that Harold's attacks on her weren't just personal. They were part of a larger pattern that might constitute criminal harassment and interference with employment. More importantly, the private investigator Harold hired to dig up dirt on Emma had violated several state and federal privacy laws in the process. The investigator Harold used a man named Robert Chen was operating without a proper license and using illegal methods to access personal information, Emma explained. My lawyer found evidence that Chen had hacked into my personal email accounts and stolen private documents to give to Harold. This revelation opened up an entirely new avenue of investigation. If Harold was using illegal private investigators and stolen personal information to destroy people, he was committing federal crimes that went far beyond simple family manipulation. I spent the next week building a comprehensive case against Harold Blackwell. Using my marketing research skills, I created detailed timelines, documented evidence, and compiled testimonials from his victims. Emma introduced me to Dr. Sarah Kim, the veterinarian Harold had targeted, who was eager to share her story and evidence. Patricia and Marcus helped me understand the legal implications of what we were discovering. Harold wasn't just a manipulative father. He was running a systematic campaign of criminal harassment against innocent people. But the biggest breakthrough came when I decided to investigate Harold's financial crimes more deeply. Using public records and connections Patricia had developed in the legal community, I discovered Harold's fraud was much more extensive than anyone realized. Harold hadn't just stolen money from Ryan's trust fund. He had been systematically looting accounts belonging to all three of his children. Amanda's college fund, James's inheritance from their grandmother, and Ryan's substantial trust had all been drained to cover Harold's debts and legal expenses. Marcus helped me understand the financial documents we were uncovering. Harold had forged signatures on legal documents, created false financial statements, and used his children's identities to secure loans they never authorized. The total amount of money stolen exceeded $3 million. This isn't family dysfunction, Marcus said, reviewing the evidence we had compiled. This is organized financial fraud on a massive scale. Harold has been running a long-term embezzlement scheme using his own children as victims. But the most shocking discovery was still ahead. While researching Harold's business dealings, I found evidence of his arrangement with the Morrison family that went beyond Ryan's forced marriage to Victoria. Harold owed the Morrison family over $800,000 from a failed real estate deal 3 years ago. The arranged marriage wasn't just about bringing money into the family. It was Harold's way of avoiding repayment of a massive debt. If Ryan married Victoria, Charles Morrison had agreed to forgive the debt and provide additional funding to keep Blackwell Properties afloat. Harold was literally selling his son to pay off his business failures. Armed with this evidence, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just exposing Harold privately or seeking personal revenge, I decided to contact federal law enforcement. The FBI's white-collar crime division was very interested in the evidence we had compiled. Agent Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in financial fraud cases, reviewed our documentation and confirmed that Harold's crimes fell under federal jurisdiction. Ms. Johnson, what you've uncovered is a complex case of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and criminal harassment, Agent Walsh said during our meeting. We've actually been investigating some of Harold Blackwell's business practices for several months, but we didn't have evidence of his personal crimes against family members and their partners. Agent Walsh explained that federal authorities had been building a case against Harold for tax evasion and securities fraud related to his real estate business. Our evidence of his personal crimes provided the missing pieces they needed to move forward with a comprehensive prosecution. We're prepared to act quickly, Agent Walsh said, but we need to time this carefully to gather maximum evidence and prevent Harold from destroying records or fleeing. That's when Agent Walsh shared the detail that would make everything perfect. The FBI had been planning to arrest Harold for weeks, but they needed the right moment to execute the warrant when he couldn't claim he was being persecuted for political or business reasons. A public arrest at a high-profile charity event in front of witnesses who know his character would be ideal for our case, Agent Walsh said. It demonstrates that his crimes are serious enough to warrant immediate action regardless of his social status. The Children's Hospital charity gala, where Harold planned to announce Ryan's engagement to Victoria Morrison, would be the perfect setting for federal agents to arrest him for fraud embezzlement and criminal harassment. Justice was about to be served in the most public and humiliating way possible. Harold Blackwell, who had spent years destroying other people's lives and dignity, was about to lose everything in front of 300 of Portland's most prominent citizens. And I would be there to watch it happen. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was held at the historic Multnomah Athletic Club, a grand building downtown with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that screamed old money and established power. I arrived wearing a simple but elegant navy dress I had borrowed from Patricia, feeling calmer and more confident than I had in weeks. Emma had driven down from Seattle for the evening, and Amanda had taken the day off work to be there. We weren't attending as guests. Agent Walsh had arranged for us to be present as potential witnesses, positioned where we could observe everything while staying out of Harold's immediate sight. The ballroom was filled with Portland's elite: tech executives, real estate moguls, prominent attorneys, and society families who had been attending this annual event for decades. Harold Blackwell worked the room like the seasoned manipulator he was, charming potential business partners and maintaining his facade of successful respectability. I watched Ryan from across the room, standing next to Victoria Morrison near the silent auction tables. Victoria was undeniably beautiful. Tall blonde, impeccably dressed in what was probably a $5,000 gown. But Ryan looked miserable. His smile seemed forced, his posture tense, and he kept glancing around the room as if looking for an escape route. Victoria, on the other hand, appeared completely comfortable with the arrangement. She laughed at appropriate moments, posed for photos with practiced ease, and played the role of the perfect society girlfriend. I realized she probably had no idea this was supposed to be her engagement night either. Harold had positioned himself near the small stage where the evening's program would take place. At 9 o'clock after dinner and the charity auction, he was scheduled to make remarks thanking the sponsors and announcing his wonderful news about Ryan's engagement. Agent Walsh and her team were stationed discreetly throughout the ballroom, disguised as catering staff and security personnel. The plan was to allow Harold to begin his announcement speech, then arrest him publicly as he attempted to manipulate his son one final time. At 8:30, I noticed Ryan approaching his father with what looked like a serious expression. Even from a distance, I could see Harold's body language shift from charming host to controlling patriarch as Ryan spoke to him privately. Emma, who was standing near the champagne station, texted me what she had overheard. Ryan is trying to tell his dad he doesn't want to marry Victoria. Harold is threatening to cut off his trust fund access. Amanda, positioned near the family's table, sent another update. Harold just told Ryan that he's already committed to the Morrison family, and backing out now would destroy the family's reputation permanently. I watched this psychological manipulation happening in real time. Harold using guilt, fear, and financial pressure to force his adult son into a loveless marriage. Ryan's shoulders sagged with defeat as Harold's threats hit their mark. At 9 o'clock, sharp, Harold stepped up to the microphone on the small stage. The room quieted as 300 people turned their attention to him. He began with gracious remarks about the Children's Hospital and the importance of community philanthropy, playing his role perfectly. Tonight, I'm thrilled to share wonderful news about my family. Harold said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with practiced authority. My son Ryan has found love with a remarkable young woman who shares our family's values and commitment to excellence. I could see Ryan's face from where I stood. He looked like a man facing execution, not engagement. Victoria smiled brilliantly beside him, apparently still unaware that this was news to her as well. It brings me tremendous joy to announce the engagement of Ryan Blackwell to Victoria Morrison, uniting two families who have contributed so much to our beautiful city. The applause was polite, but not enthusiastic. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances, clearly sensing something was off about the announcement. Ryan had not proposed, there was no ring, and both young people looked uncomfortable, rather than happy. That's when Agent Walsh and her team moved into action. Harold Blackwell, you are under arrest for federal charges of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and criminal harassment. The words cut through the applause like a knife. Agent Walsh approached the stage with her badge clearly visible, while 4 other agents positioned themselves throughout the room to prevent any attempt at flight. The ballroom fell into absolute silence. 300 of Portland's most powerful people watched in shock as federal agents placed handcuffs on Harold Blackwell in front of the stage where he had just tried to manipulate his son into a fraudulent engagement. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Harold's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, fear, and finally panic as he realized his carefully constructed empire was collapsing in the most public way possible. He looked desperately around the room as if expecting someone to intervene or explain that this was all a mistake. Ryan stood frozen on the stage, processing what was happening. In less than 5 minutes, he had learned that his engagement was arranged, his father was a criminal, and his entire understanding of his family's situation was built on lies. Agent Walsh approached Ryan with a folder of documents. Mr. Blackwell, we need to speak with you about your trust fund and several financial accounts that appear to have been compromised. You may be the victim of identity theft and embezzlement. As Harold was escorted from the ballroom in handcuffs, he spotted me standing near the back of the room. For just a moment, our eyes met across the crowd. I saw recognition rage, and finally, a grudging respect in his expression. He had underestimated the girl from the wrong side of town, and that mistake had cost him everything. Victoria Morrison stood alone on the stage, finally understanding that her supposed engagement was actually a business arrangement that had just collapsed into a federal crime scene. Charles Morrison quickly approached his daughter and began escorting her toward the exit, clearly wanting to distance the Morrison family from the scandal immediately. Ryan remained on the stage holding the folder Agent Walsh had given him, reading about crimes committed against him by his own father. The man who had psychologically controlled him for 26 years had also been stealing from him for 5. As the ballroom erupted into shocked conversations and urgent phone calls, I felt a profound sense of completion. Harold Blackwell, who had spent years destroying innocent people to maintain his power, had finally faced consequences for his actions. Justice had been served in front of everyone who needed to witness it. 2 weeks after Harold's arrest, Ryan called me. I was working late at Davidson Creative, putting the finishing touches on a campaign for a local nonprofit when my phone rang. Leanna, it's Ryan. I know I have no right to ask, but could we meet? I need to apologize to you properly, and there are things you should know about what's happening with my family. We met at Powell's Books downtown in the cafe section where the noise would provide privacy, and the public setting would keep our conversation appropriate. Ryan looked like he had lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. His eyes were hollow, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, and he carried himself like someone who had discovered his entire life was built on lies. I don't know where to start, Ryan said, stirring his coffee nervously. I've been in therapy every day since the arrest, trying to understand how I let my father control me for so long. He explained how Harold had shaped his psychology from childhood through a systematic pattern of emotional manipulation. Any independence or authentic relationship was met with withdrawal of love, approval, and financial support. Harold would create crises that required Ryan to choose between his own happiness and family loyalty, then punish him when he made the wrong choice. When you and I started dating, I felt genuine happiness for the first time in years. Ryan said, his voice cracking slightly. But Harold immediately began undermining the relationship. He told me you were obviously using me for money, that women from your background always had ulterior motives, that I was being naive and embarrassing the family. Ryan had been psychologically programmed to doubt his own judgment and defer to Harold's superior wisdom about people and relationships. When Harold scripted the engagement dinner, Humiliation, Ryan followed the plan because he had been conditioned since childhood to trust his father's strategies over his own instincts. "I knew what we were doing to you was wrong," Ryan said, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "But I had been trained to believe that temporary cruelty was sometimes necessary for long-term family stability. I thought if I just followed Harold's plan, everything would work out for everyone eventually." The psychological abuse Ryan described was systematic and sophisticated. Harold had isolated his children from outside perspectives, controlled their financial independence, and created trauma bonds that made them desperate for his approval, while terrified of his rejection. "Dr. Martinez, my therapist, says I was essentially raised in a cult-like environment," Ryan continued. "Harold created a closed system where he controlled all information, all relationships, and all resources. Breaking free from that kind of psychological conditioning doesn't happen overnight." But Ryan's therapy had revealed something else: the depth of Harold's criminal behavior against his own children. Agent Walsh had worked with Ryan to uncover the full extent of the embezzlement and fraud. Leanna Harold stole over $3 million from Amanda James and me over the past 5 years. He forged our signatures on loan documents, used our identities to secure credit, and drained accounts our grandfather had specifically created for our education and independence. The stolen money had been used to cover Harold's business failures, legal fees, and personal expenses, while maintaining the family's wealthy lifestyle. Harold had deliberately kept his children financially dependent on him while secretly stealing their inheritance. "My grandfather specifically designed those trust funds to give us independence from Harold," Ryan explained. "Grandfather knew Harold was manipulative and controlling. He wanted to ensure we could make our own choices about relationships and careers without financial pressure. The trust funds contained not just money but controlling shares in several of Harold's real estate companies. Ryan now owned 51% of Blackwell Properties, making him the majority shareholder and effective owner of the legitimate parts of his father's business empire. Agent Walsh says I have legal grounds to take full control of the company and cooperate with authorities to recover stolen assets," Ryan said. "I could potentially save the parts of the business that aren't contaminated by Harold's crimes." But the most shocking revelation was still coming. Harold's arrangements with the Morrison family were even more complex than we had realized. The engagement to Victoria wasn't just about money, Ryan said, pulling out legal documents Agent Walsh had given him. Harold owed the Morrison family over $800,000 from a failed deal, but there was more to it. Harold had secretly used Ryan's identity and trust fund as collateral for multiple business loans over the past 3 years. If those loans defaulted, Ryan would be personally liable for over $2 million in debt he never knew existed. "The marriage to Victoria was supposed to solve everything," Ryan explained. "Charles Morrison would forgive Harold's debt, provide new funding for the business, and the Morrison family lawyers would help restructure the loans to remove my liability. Harold had literally planned to sell his son into marriage to cover his own crimes and debts. If the plan had succeeded, Ryan would have spent his entire life trapped in a loveless marriage, while Harold continued stealing from the family business and using his children as collateral for future schemes." Dr. Martinez says Harold's behavior fits the pattern of narcissistic personality disorder combined with criminal sociopathy, Ryan said. "He's incapable of empathy or genuine love. We were all just resources he could manipulate and exploit for his own benefit." But Ryan had discovered something else that changed everything. In Harold's personal files seized by federal agents, they found evidence of Harold's systematic destruction of relationships going back over 15 years. "Leanna, you weren't his first victim or even his 10th. Harold has been destroying people's lives for decades to maintain control over his children and business partners. He kept detailed records of his campaigns against people he wanted eliminated. The files contained evidence of Harold's attacks on dozens of innocent people: teachers, social workers, nurses, small business owners, and other working-class individuals who had dared to form relationships with his children or challenge his business practices. Some of the people Harold destroyed never recovered. Ryan said, his voice filled with grief and guilt. There are teachers who left education, social workers who changed careers, small business owners who went bankrupt after Harold launched campaigns against them. Agent Walsh had told Ryan that his cooperation in exposing Harold's pattern of criminal harassment would be crucial for ensuring justice for all the victims, not just the financial crimes against the family. "That's why I'm calling you," Ryan said, looking directly at me for the first time since we sat down. "Agent Walsh says your evidence and documentation were crucial for building the case against Harold. You didn't just save yourself, you saved everyone he might have destroyed in the future." Ryan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder of documents. "I want to offer you something not as an apology for what happened between us, but as recognition for what you've accomplished. I'm using my ownership of Blackwell Properties to establish a foundation that will provide legal assistance and financial support to victims of systematic harassment and abuse. The foundation would be funded by liquidating Harold's personal assets and redirecting profits from the legitimate parts of Blackwell Properties toward helping people rebuild their lives after being targeted by powerful predators. I want you to consider serving as the foundation's director," Ryan said. "Your marketing skills, your research abilities, and your understanding of what Harold's victims experienced would make you perfect for the position. You could help other people who've been through what you went through." I stared at the documents Ryan had given me, feeling a mixture of emotions I couldn't immediately identify. The man who had broken my heart by participating in my public humiliation was offering me the opportunity to turn that painful experience into meaningful work helping other victims. "Ryan, I appreciate what you're trying to do," I said carefully, "but I need you to understand that what happened between us can't be fixed by offering me a job or throwing money at the problem." "I know," Ryan said quickly. "I'm not trying to repair our relationship or ask for your forgiveness. I'm asking if you want to help other people who've been through similar experiences. Whether you and I ever speak again after today is completely your decision." I looked at this broken, traumatized man who was trying to use his newfound freedom and resources to create something positive from his father's legacy of destruction. His offer was genuine, his motivation was sound, and the work would be meaningful. But I had already decided what I wanted to do with my life. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my own office in a converted warehouse in Southeast Portland, looking out at the Willamette River while reviewing applications for my marketing consultancy's newest clients. The sign on my door reads, "Authentic Voices Marketing, Building Brands with Integrity." Starting my own business was the best decision I ever made. After everything that happened with the Blackwell family, I realized I wanted to use my professional skills to help small businesses and nonprofit organizations tell their authentic stories without pretense or manipulation. My client list includes family-owned restaurants, local artisans, environmental nonprofits, and social service organizations. People doing meaningful work who need strategic marketing support but can't afford big agency fees. I specialize in helping authentic voices reach their audiences without compromising their values or integrity. The irony isn't lost on me that Harold's attempt to humiliate me for my working-class background led me to build a business specifically serving working-class entrepreneurs and community organizations. Ryan followed through on establishing the Foundation for Harassment Victims, which he named the Emma Thompson Foundation, in honor of his ex-girlfriend who lost her teaching career because of Harold's attacks. Emma moved back to Portland and now serves as the Foundation's Victim Advocate Coordinator, helping people navigate legal processes and rebuild their professional lives. Amanda left her job in Eugene and joined the Foundation as a family counselor, specializing in helping people recover from systematic psychological abuse and manipulation. Her personal experience with Harold's control tactics made her uniquely qualified to understand what victims need to heal. The foundation has helped 37 people in its first 6 months, providing legal assistance counseling services and financial support to individuals targeted by powerful predators who thought they could destroy people without consequences. Dr. Sarah Kim, the veterinarian Harold had targeted 3 years ago, was able to reopen her practice with a loan from the foundation. She now volunteers her time providing veterinary services to animal shelters throughout the Portland area. David Martinez, Amanda's ex-boyfriend, received a formal apology letter from the foundation acknowledging the false allegations Harold had made against his teaching career. David was promoted to assistant principal at his school and recently announced his engagement to a fellow educator he met at a literacy conference. Harold was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and criminal harassment. The judge specifically noted that his systematic destruction of innocent people's lives demonstrated a callous disregard for human dignity that warrants significant incarceration. He will be eligible for parole in 8 years. The Morrison family severed all business connections with the Blackwells the day after Harold's arrest. Victoria Morrison married a tech executive from Seattle last month, apparently relieved to have escaped Harold's manipulation. James Ryan's older brother used his share of the recovered money to start a sustainable agriculture business in Central Oregon. He's engaged to an environmental scientist who shares his passion for regenerative farming practices. Ryan and I maintained a professional friendship based on our shared commitment to helping other victims of systematic abuse. He attends therapy twice a week and has learned to make independent decisions without seeking approval from authority figures. We never rekindled our romantic relationship, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. The man I fell in love with was partly a performance Ryan created to rebel against his father. The real Ryan is still discovering who he is when he's not being controlled or manipulated by someone else. But our experience taught me something profound about authentic relationships. When someone truly loves you, they defend you against attack, especially from their own family. Ryan's failure to protect me during that engagement dinner revealed that our relationship wasn't built on the solid foundation I thought it was. I've since learned that real love doesn't require you to prove your worth to anyone. The right person sees your value immediately and consistently without needing their family's approval or society's validation. 3 months ago, I started dating Marcus Rodriguez, the paralegal who helped me research Harold's crimes. Marcus grew up in a working-class family similar to mine, understands the value of hard work and education, and has never made me feel like I need to apologize for my background. When Marcus introduced me to his family at their annual barbecue in Hillsborough, his mother hugged me and said, "Any woman smart enough to take down a criminal like Harold Blackwell is welcome at our table any time." His father spent the evening asking about my business plans and offering to connect me with potential clients in his neighborhood. That's what acceptance looks like in a healthy family. No games, no tests, no humiliation disguised as tradition. The most meaningful part of this whole experience has been the letters I receive from people who've heard my story through the Foundation's outreach work. Women and men who've been targeted by powerful predators, who've been told they weren't good enough for someone they loved, who've been humiliated for their backgrounds or circumstances. Last week, I received a letter from a young teacher in Salem whose relationship was destroyed by her boyfriend's wealthy parents. She wrote, "Your story gave me permission to stop blaming myself and start fighting back. I realized I didn't lose something valuable. I escaped something toxic." That's the life lesson I want to share with you. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, especially during moments of conflict or crisis, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses for people who allow their families to humiliate you. Don't rationalize away red flags, and don't stay in situations that require you to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. Walking away from toxicity, even when it's painful, and even when you love the people involved, creates space in your life for authentic relationships and genuine opportunities. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to you. Harold Blackwell thought he was destroying a naive girl who didn't know her place. Instead, he motivated a determined woman to build exactly the life she wanted, surrounded by people who value her character over her circumstances. True wealth isn't about money or status. It's about having the courage to live authentically, the wisdom to surround yourself with people who celebrate your success rather than diminish it, and the strength to stand up for yourself when others try to make you small. I learned that I don't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. Neither do you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone's family made you feel like you weren't good enough? How did you handle it, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help it reach more people who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming adversity and building authentic relationships. And share this video with someone who might benefit from understanding that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions or social status. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve to be with people who see your value from the beginning and defend it consistently. Never settle for less than that kind of love and respect.